Hey, everybody. Welcome to Dog Life Radio. This is episode 34 coming at you. And I am your host, Rossi Giugio. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me on the 34th installment of Dog Life. Very cool. All right, so we got something fun for you today. I recently had the opportunity to speak with Jinh Yu-Frey. Now, Jinh is an Atomweight fighter for Invicta FC. Atomweight is 105 pounds. She is not only an Atomweight fighter, she is teed up to fight Mina Grusander for the Atomweight belt. Let's see, this is for Invicta FC 30 on July the 21st in Kansas City, Missouri. So what does all this mean? I'm throwing a lot out at you. Okay, everybody's probably heard of the UFC. If you have not heard of Invicta, Invicta is the premier women's MMA organization on the planet. The UFC has kind of taken, they're in bed together, so to speak, where a lot of the fighters from Invicta in certain weight classes have made their way over to the UFC. The UFC actually ended up, a few years ago, they basically bought all of the top talent at the straw weight, which is 115 pounds, from Invicta and brought them over to create their 115 pound weight class up at the UFC. So they've got the 115. They just started the 125. They've got 135, and they're kind of kicking around the 145 as well. But Invicta has got all of that and the 105. The UFC hasn't stuck their toe into that proverbial pool just yet. But Jinh is definitely looking to make a name for herself and put her in a great spot should she win. So let's see, what else? Invicta stuff. She is 6-3. She's fighting Grusander, who's 6-1. Looks to be a pretty good fight. Coming up, I already hit that stuff. So the conversation with Jinh was pretty cool. We've been working a little bit trying to get together to make some time for this, as she is in her camp. She is training. She is not too long out for this fight. So hopefully you enjoy it. We're going to take a quick pause for the calls, and we'll come back with the podcast that you should listen to. Yes, I do have one this week. So, momentito, people.
Whoa, how did we get on this podcast?
I'm not sure, but I like it here.
It's pretty great, but we should probably tell everyone about our own podcast, Fueled by Deathcast.
Hell yeah. Comes out every Thursday from the Death Wish Coffee Company, the world's strongest coffee.
Every week you can hear me, the Incredible Jeff.
And me, the amazing D-Man.
And we talk about new science discoveries, breaking news from Death Wish Coffee, and we welcome a special guest from rock stars to astronauts and ask them all the question, what fuels you?
The podcast is available right on deathwishcoffee.com and wherever podcasts are found, including iTunes, Google Music, Stitcher, and more.
Plus, you can now watch it live on the Death Wish Coffee Company page on Facebook and watch all our videos over on YouTube.
All right. Now you know all about Fueled by Deathcast and how you can listen to it.
But first, let's finish this podcast.
Let's get back to the show.
Hey gang, remember, life is too short for crappy coffee. Check out Death Wish Coffee at deathwishcoffee.com. They have got two signature blends. Their Odin Force blend, or Valhalla Java, is a smoother, more mild roast. And for those of you like myself who like a stronger, bolder flavored coffee, check out the flagship, Death Wish Coffee. Fantastic stuff. You're going to love it. It is the world's strongest coffee. All right, welcome back. So, before we jump into the conversation with Miss Jinh Yu-Frey, the podcast that you should be listening to this week is none other than Mike Dolce, episode 196. Now, I know he does not need my ringing endorsement to get many listeners and people to hear his words, but episode 196 was called Fed or Fasted. The reason why I like this one a lot was he really gets into a lot of the details surrounding fasted cardio, eating before cardio, post cardio, that type of a thing, as well as the combinations of eating before training as well as going in fasted. So some really good stuff there. Granted, he does get into a little bit of an advertisement for the Dolce food training regimen, 3 weeks to shred it, and that's what his job is. So no big deal there. But anyway, definitely worth a listen to. Check it out, episode 196. Fed or Fasted from the Dolce Show. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Miss Jinh Yu-Frey. Enjoy, people. We'll get going. Okay. All right. Well, we are recording. This is Rasa Gigio on another episode of Dog Life Radio. We've got ourselves a very, very special guest, Jinh Yu-Frey, Atomweight fighter for Invicta. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. Appreciate you shifting things around and making time to talk with us. I know this one was a little bit bouncing ball, but I'm glad to have you on. It's funny because I think the first time that I reached out to you about coming on to the show, I had not seen anything formally announced about your next fight, and then coincidentally, since then I did see something. So it seems like you have something pretty big in the works here.
I'll be fighting for the Invicta Atomweight title July 21st, which I actually already knew about it, but was just, kind of waiting for them to release the news. So, been a busy bee in training.
I bet. Well, talk to me a little bit about that. For let's see, most of the listeners are familiar with MMA. We've had a couple of different MMA fighters on before, female fighters as well as male. But you are the very first from Invicta, and definitely the very first Atomweight.
So Atomweight is 105 pounds. It's the smallest division there is, and Invicta is just a all women's pro MMA platform. And for the 105-pound division, it's pretty much the largest platform that you can fight on at this point. The UFC has picked up every single women's division thus far, except 105. And so, as of right now, it just of fighting for the 105-pound division. So it's kind of a big deal.
Absolutely is a big deal. You should be, I would expect you to be more excited. This is a fantastic opportunity. And yeah, the 105 Invictus is phenomenal. It is the top of the food chain in that weight class. Now, Invicta as a whole has been doing fantastic, even with the UFC kind of coming in and taking a lot of the other fighters from the 115s and some of the other weight classes as well. Are you focused on that aspect of thinking maybe at some point UFC might come back down and grab 105, or right now you're just focused on what's in front of you coming up in July?
Really just all that matters is, my opponent, Mina Grusander. There's actually already been rumors that as part of the ESPN deal, the UFC was going to go ahead and add 105 pounds. I don't know if it's come out of any credible sources. I've just kind of seen it thrown around. But, right now that's really not my focus. All I care about is the girl that's going to be in front of me and bringing home the belt.
Very cool. Very cool. So, absolutely. I don't want to talk too much about the whole UFC kind of the rumors about that, but they've absolutely been trying to bring in more female fighters, expanding in that space. I think 105 is just as exciting as any of the other ones. It would be fantastic to see that move to the UFC, or at the minimum, getting a bigger platform so more people could see Invicta fighters.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about you now. One of the first things I wanted to ask you, but I jumped into some of this other stuff, was how did you actually first get involved in mixed martial arts?
I actually just used to go work out at a gym, and I was just a runner. I played sports kind of all through middle school and high school, and then once I had graduated college and I was working in my career. The regular gym, I would just run on the treadmill, and that was about all I did. And the gym actually started an MMA program, and so they're kind of off in their own watching as I'm running on the treadmill, and I'm kind of getting bored with just running all the time, and so I started doing their conditioning classes, and then eventually one of the girls. There was only one girl in there, and she never really had anyone to work with. So then she was like, "Hey, kickboxing." And then it was like, "Hey, would you stay for jiu-jitsu?" And then, it was turned into me being there every night for 3 hours. And then I'm a really competitive person. And so eventually it kind of just evolved into me wanting to compete as well.
Well, I could see how being competitive could be definitely something that would bring you into MMA. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it, and it seems like there's this continuous evolution. Very hard to master even some aspects of it, let alone the whole ball of wax. But with your training, is there one particular aspect that is your favorite? Do you prefer ground game? Do you prefer to be jiu-jitsu, striking? What's your favorite part? Not necessarily the part that you think is your most fearsome at your strength, but the one you like to do the most.
Well, when I first started, I just liked kickboxing, and I didn't really like the jiu-jitsu. I didn't really like wrestling. I'm like, I don't really like people in my face and other people's armpits, and that sort of thing. And as an amateur, I won like 2 or 3 fights just with kickboxing. Finally, I came across somebody who had better grappling, and I lost my first fight as an amateur by submission. And then after that, I was like, okay, that's not cool. Like, I'm gonna have to, like, if I'm going to do this, obviously I'm going to have to learn jiu-jitsu and learn to wrestle. And it's kind of funny, like, I've taken the last couple years so hard on wrestling, to where I'm wrestling like 4 or 5 days a week, and going into wrestling clubs, going into high schools, going into colleges, and just going into mat rooms and wrestling. And it's kind of funny because now it's like my favorite thing to do is wrestle.
It's funny because wrestling seems to be, I don't know not sure exactly how to say it, but if you are a very good wrestler, if that is your strength or something that you can dominate in, you can dictate the whole pace of the fight. And we see that in so many different aspects in all of your, typical fighter versus grappler spaces. If that grappler's incredibly adept at it and strong, they can the clinch game and they can work and they can control it. And the wrestlers, people with strong wrestling games, seem to be the ones dominating the tops of the weight divisions. Doesn't matter if it's female or male.
Absolutely. Because if you're a strong enough grappler, if you're having trouble on the feet, you can get the fight to the ground. You can get to where you're comfortable. So you can really dictate where the fight takes place. If you feel like you're doing great on your feet, you can stand. But if you feel like, you're getting outclassed a little bit on your feet, then, just take it to where you're comfortable. And if you're a great grappler, then you can get in and, no one can stop your takedown, and you can take it wherever the fight needs to be for you to be comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I love jiu-jitsu, love Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but I know recently I think it was Kamaru Usman and Damian Maia. Usman's wrestling, obviously, I think kind of was a strong point of the fight where he could dictate where the fight wanted to go. He could control it. And I absolutely agree. I think transitions and scrambling, that is a huge space where wrestling plays a big factor and might go not as well noticed.
Yeah, and if you've never had a good wrestler on you, like, it is the most exhausting, like, energy zapping thing that can stick on you. Like, wow, it is so exhausting and so frustrating to have someone just neutralize you and hold you down. And first time I ever was like a good wrestler, it was just flowing, and I was like, I have to be able to do that.
Yeah, it is kind of funny how when you've got somebody who's got a strong top game, they'll literally take your breath away, and the amount of energy that you have to expend just to kind of try to moving people around, trying to get the person off of you, trying to get the different positions, whether it's up against the cage or on the ground, that type of effort drains the energy out of you, and then you can see that it wears on you over time. And by the time you're getting into the second and third rounds, or even if you're going further than that, you can see the wear. It's almost as physically damaging as taking some good shots.
Yeah, wrestling is by far probably the most exhausting thing I've ever done, and if I can go into a wrestling room and wrestle live for like an hour, I know I'm in fantastic shape and I can go 5 rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were saying that you were going in and really focusing on your wrestling and training. Now, you're going in and training any, who's ever available. I'm picturing, you fight at 105. What do you generally walk around at?
Like 120.
Oh, 120. Okay, good. Weight cutting seems to be on the tops of everybody's minds as well lately with different aspects of. I always jump back to like Khabib's liver and all. the liver problems that he was having, I think at the 2 times ago when he was supposed to be fighting Tony Ferguson. Plus it's popped up now and again, and then most recently with Mackenzie Dern missing weight as well. But you're walking around at 120, so you're cutting about 15 pounds. Is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it just something that you just got to get done? Tell us about your weight cut.
I feel like I have it a lot easier than most. Like my husband is a nutritionist, and so he does all our grocery shopping. He does all my meal prepping. He cooks every meal from scratch. So I have it a lot easier than most. Like I just come home from training and then I lay on the couch and he gets in there and works his magic. But it's still like we start dieting like 5, sometimes 6 weeks out, and I won't say it's easy just because it gets monotonous. Like I get tired of eating the same things all the time. Like some days you just have a really hard day, you just have a bad day. They have that saying, some days you're the hammer and some days you're the nail. And sometimes you're just so beat down, like you kind of just want some comfort food. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm, and so when you're like eating clean all the time and you're just like, God, this is not satisfying whatsoever. Like I'm full, but it's not what I wanted. It just didn't hit the spot for me. So that it gets kind of old. Like the first 2 weeks are usually okay. It's usually like the middle 3-4 weeks where you're just like, holy shit, I'm so sick of this. And like I think every camp there's probably one point where I'm like, I'm never gonna do this again. This is terrible. I'm never gonna cut to 105 again. But then, like the last 2 weeks, you start getting close to the fight. Like your focus really starts to dial in. It's fight week. Fight week is like a breeze. And I think it's because I started so early and I did all the hard work early on. Like a lot of people wait last minute and try to lose all the weight. But we do kind of a slow, gradual thing and give my body time to adjust to the weight loss. And, fight week's usually a breeze for me. So I'd rather fight week be easy than, me stressing at the last minute, thinking that I'm not going to make weight or it being just a huge thing. So, cutting weight's not fun, but
no, man,
like I said, I think I have it a lot easier than a lot of people do.
Well, it sounds like you're approaching it from a much more scientific and tested method. Coming into fight week, generally, what are you walking in at fight week at? You're closer,
maybe like 10 pounds over.
Yeah. So
and
like much more
my husband has like journals, like probably the last 6-7 of my weight cuts, he's journaled it. So he writes down what I wake up at. He writes down like what I did for training the day. He writes down exactly what I ate. He breaks everything down like macros, my fat content, protein, carbohydrate, and then, he has everything journaled. And so, there's always a point in my weight cut where I'm like, or just during the whole camp where I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think I'm losing weight fast enough. I start getting a little stressed out, and I don't know why, because it's like I always make weight, but I always have that point where I'm like, I'm not losing weight fast enough. I'm not seeing the numbers I want to see on the scale. And so my husband always goes back to all his journals and he pulls it open. And he's like, okay, at this fight camp, this many days out, this is what you weighed. This fight camp, this is what you weighed. This fight camp, this is what you weighed. You're perfectly on track.
Now, and I don't think enough people actually have somebody there with them going through their camps who's had that much experience, and that's where you start to see a lot of people coming into fight camp or fight week, and they're looking at 15, 20 pounds, and that's just not healthy, and that is a lot of weight to cut.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of weight to cut.
So when you're eating clean, and you're talking about your macros, and your husband's helping you out and preparing food and doing all the shopping, what is eating clean to you? What are you eating? Are you eating a lot of chicken? Are you doing pork? Are you doing ground beef, grass fed? What's the scoop?
Well, we do a lot of chicken and fish. I actually have a guy that I went to college with who has started raising cattle, and he sends me like a lot of grass fed lean cuts. So we'll incorporate those as well. Tons of vegetables, tons and tons of vegetables. Like my husband almost doesn't even count vegetables. He's like, you need as many vegetables as you want, because you know what? A whole handful of spinach is like 35 calories. So you eat all the spinach you want. So it's like I'll eat, my carbs, my fat, and my protein. And then it's like, if I'm still hungry, if I feel like I didn't get enough, he just like stir fries up vegetables, and I can just keep eating vegetables until I'm full. Because vegetables really don't have a lot of calories.
Yeah, it's funny. I've in the past 2 weeks, I think I've also turned over a new leaf with spinach as well, where I started to just really eat a lot more of it, and tons of micronutrients as well.
Yeah, he's all about like nutrient density and stuff that's
That's the
not
important
empty
stuff.
calories. So yeah, lots of vegetables. I think one camp I could have swore that I went through like 40 pounds of spinach. I was like, I'm so sick of spinach.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, so you were saying there's a point in every camp where you're like, ugh, I don't want to do this. You get tired of eating the same old stuff, tired of spinach. When you're at that point, when you're at the point where you're ready to crack and you're like, this is the food I want to eat right now. The comfort food, the food that you can't eat. You can't, but you want to. What is it?
It's like different every time. There was one camp where like I was really just craving wings. And then there was one camp where like all I could think about were just like cookies, and I don't ever eat cookies. And then there was one camp where I just wanted cheesecake. And so it's like every camp it's kind of something different. It's like one thing that I just kind of fixate on, and I'm like, that's all I think about.
All right. Well, I guess that keeps you always thinking, and maybe it'd be tougher if it was always the same thing. If like you were always thinking about cheesecake, and you knew it was that, and you knew it was coming, and you knew you were going to want it. Maybe it'd be harder, I guess. Where if you don't know, you kind of got to go through it. You get to that brink, and then you're like, ice cream would be kind of good right now.
Yeah, it's like you would think it. I always thought it was weird when people would watch like food channels, and I'm like, what are they doing to themselves? That sounds like that's terrible. Like, why would you do that? But it actually isn't that bad. Like, I've gotten to where like I'll watch food channels like during fight week where I'm just like laying in my hotel room, and I'm just like, wow, that looks so good. Like,
Really?
And I'm like, Doug, doesn't that look great? Like, why don't we get that when I'm done? Like next week, why don't we go get some of that? And he's just like, what are you doing? Turn off the TV. And I'm like, no. And I'm like watching Man versus Food, and like,
Oh my God,
I don't know what it is, but I'm just
way.
like, oh, this just sounds so good.
I could never watch that. Oh man, I have a hard time watching that normally. Because it doesn't matter what they're eating, it always just looks so good. Like the world's biggest burrito, or like the scalding hot chicken wings that are nuclear, gonna melt your eyes.
There was one that was like, I think it was in Denver, and there was like a 7-pound breakfast burrito that they were trying to finish. Like, I'm pretty convinced that I could do it.
7 pounds?
Yeah, it was like 7-pound breakfast burrito, and I was like, I'm like pretty positive I could eat that. But I'm like, I don't know why I'm watching this during fight week.
Well, I tell you what, you take home the strap, then you got to video yourself eating a 7-pound breakfast burrito. Put that on YouTube. That's going to get 1 billion hits. Without a doubt.
Yeah, I can definitely put away some food. Like normally I'm like, I'll eat my plate, and then I'm like, are you done with that? Are you going to finish? And I finish like half my husband's plate. Like, I can eat some food.
So is it like a really high metabolism, tons of work effort because you're always training? Because I mean,
I think so.
You just think, I'm thinking about it going, okay, you're 5'2", 105 pounds, you walk around at 120. I mean, that's still on the very small side. And to be able to put away a ton of food, and then obviously stay in the kind of shape you are, and able to do the work that you're doing, not many people can do it. That's phenomenal.
But then, it's like the people that always win like those hot dog eating contests are always like the teeniest, tiny little Asian people. So maybe it's like a genetic thing.
Maybe. That guy had ripped abs too. I remember. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was shredded, and he'd eat like 50 hot dogs in a couple of minutes. It's crazy.
Yeah. There's a big thing in like South Korea now called mukbang channels, and these people like sit and eat like 3,000-4,000 calories worth of food like in a sitting. Like they just stream themselves eating for like hours, and it's like a huge thing in South Korea. And a lot of them are still like I watched a behind the scenes thing, and there was like this one guy, he was really popular, and so he said he had to work out pretty much like 6 hours a day so that he would stay in shape. Because of how much he would eat at night.
Oh my God! So
like,
they sit down at one meal, and they eat all of that food, and they stream it on the internet.
Yes, like usually in the evenings, and it'll be like 3 or 4 hours of them just eating.
Wow. Okay. So
it's a bit strange.
Well, hey, you know what? There's some pretty weird things on TV here right now, so
True.
You don't want to throw stones, but that's interesting. So what's the appeal there? Just to see how much they can do?
Well, I think I was reading like a like sociologist, saying that traditionally Asian cultures are very community based, and with the millennials now, they're moving out sooner. Like, you're not seeing these households with 3 or 4 generations of people, and meals were a big community thing. And so when people are moving out much earlier, you have all these people living alone, and they feel this missing link where they're not having these big community meals anymore. These relationships, connecting with people. And so it's kind of a big thing because they'll watch someone eat, and then I guess as they're eating, like, they'll have a screen up, and they'll be like, people who are watching are, texting in and typing things to them, and they're kind of interacting with the people as well. And so it's kind of like just a connection between people. And, a sociologist was saying that they thought that was, one of the reasons why it was so big right now.
Interesting. That is really interesting. So I'm Italian, so a very similar type of a thing where family meals, it's a communal thing where it's everything. Back when I was a kid, they didn't have all these cell phones, but I mean, you would put everything down: the cell phones, the radio's off, TV's off. You get together, you sit and you talk, and it's an event. It's not just eating
like
to
hours
fuel.
long.
Yeah, you would do that, and then extended family would come over too. So I when you say that from a social aspect, where it's a way, maybe because people are leaving, and it's their way to stay connected in kind of keeping that feeling going. Interesting. What's that called? What's it called again? I'm gonna have to look it up.
Mukbang. It's like MUKBANG.
Mukbang. Very cool. There you go. See, totally non-MMA at all. Not even close.
The more you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll call that out. That was interesting. That's the one thing.
So after years and years of dieting, I told my husband, I was like, maybe I'll be a mukbang star. I'll start a mukbang channel after I'm done fighting, so I can just eat and eat and eat.
Well, you'd have a really good in. The lead up to it could be all your clips and highlights of you training and your fights and everything, and then, bam, into a gigantic bowl of pasta, and then cheesecake on the side or something.
And everything, yeah.
I guess with everything, if you're going to do it for hours, man. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I don't think I was going to go there. Totally threw me off my game. Totally threw me off my game. Okay, so let's pull back to training. So we were just talking about how you get to work with your husband from a nutritional aspect. Does he also help you train in the gym, or is he kind of go there and he'll train as well? What's his story there?
So he's like our head MMA coach at Genesis, where I train, and he started overseeing my wrestling, and then he's kind of he was just offered the position as a head coach. So now he kind of puts everything together too. So I have a different jiu-jitsu coach, and I have a different boxing coach, but he kind of oversees a little bit of everything, like tying it together, and then oversees like the wrestling aspect.
Now, is that how you met, or did you know him beforehand?
I was actually already training in MMA when I met him, but I met him at some MMA fights.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. Just curious to see maybe if you pulled up and said, hey, I think I should train you on some wrestling moves.
No.
Not quite like that. Okay. All right.
Not quite that cheesy. It probably wouldn't have worked.
I can't imagine it would have. All right. So you're training at Genesis right now, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, I've got a couple of old sheets, bios on you. So this is definitely, I don't know. Are you still in Texas? This one here says
yes.
Arlington, Texas, but it does not have Genesis here. Okay, cool. So you're down in Texas. I knew what time zone you were in, but I didn't know exactly where you were right now. Okay, cool. So the big fight's coming up on the 21st. You're fighting in Kansas City. What are your predictions for the fight?
Well, she's from Finland, so I guess I'll be looking for the finish. Boom.
That was good.
Bad puns.
Well, we'll keep the mukbang and maybe not the stand-up comedy after the fighting. We'll see how it goes.
But everybody always asks, like, how do you see it going? And I am like the worst at predicting. Like, fights never go how I expect them to go. Like, I had a knockout that went kind of viral a couple years ago. And that entire camp, I spent wrestling so hard. And I was like, I am just going to grind this girl out. I am just going to wrestle her and just suffocate her. And then I get a knockout. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of how. So I'm always like, I don't know how they're gonna go. I'm gonna get in there and kick somebody's ass. That's
It's
all.
kind of a lame question, but it's one that you have to ask somebody. It's like, how do you see it going? Well, I stand and knock them out quick. It doesn't matter where they go. I'm going to finish them wherever they want. They take me to the ground, I'll submit them. They want to stand, I'm going to knock them out. Whatever way, I'm going to walk out with my hands up. That kind of thing. But it is good to kind of, I like to hear that. That's an interesting comment how you were saying, I think it was the Darla Harris fight. I think that's the one that went viral.
Yeah.
Well, that is, of course I had to see that. That was a phenomenal video. It's the kind of thing that when you look at it and you see that type of a knockout, when you're saying that you were really focused on your wrestling and your ground game leading into the fight, and then
like literally, I think I was like working striking like 1 day a week in that whole camp, and like 4 or 5 days a week, I'm just wrestling so hard. It was insane. Yeah.
Now, was that because you think Darla was going to be going to try to take you to the ground more, or you were going to try to control the space that way? What was the plan there, looking back?
I just like that was a point where like I started training at a place where they had some really good wrestling, and the coaches there were really focusing on me, and I was getting a lot of one-on-one time, and I was like, you know what? I'm here in this place. They've got great knowledge. They're really focusing on me. Like, I'm going to maximize this time and really fill in a hole that I have in my game right now. Like, I don't know how to wrestle. I didn't wrestle in high school. I didn't wrestle in college. Like, I have some, gaps to leap over and bridge that gap. So I'm really going to focus on this. And, I really started to enjoy it. And so that's what I was just spending all my time doing.
Cool. Well, it worked. You got the win.
It did.
Definitely to Google that, people. Take a look at it. Darla Harris and Jinh Yu-Frey. That one, that's a pretty cool one. I saw that a couple of different times. Now, I want to be cautious of your time. I knew we were it's late over here on the East Coast, but I do know you have an appointment coming up soon, so I don't want to keep you too long because I appreciate you being flexible and jumping on the phone with me here. But before we go, is there anything you want to plug in terms of your social media? You could even plug your husband's, your gym. We know the fight's coming up Invicta on the 21st of July. Anything you want to get out there for everybody to know?
Yeah, you can follow my journey on Instagram, on Jinh Yu-Frey. I'm on Twitter. I'm not super active on that. And then I've got a Facebook athlete page that I usually try to keep updated with fight news. So if you kind of want to see behind the scenes and what goes on and what some of training's like, what some of the diet's like, you can follow my life through pictures on there.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jinh. I appreciate you taking the time and joining us here for the show.
All right. Thanks for having me.